Let us start our lessons on section 8 and 9 of the Evidence Act. Section 8 is one of the sections in relevancy of facts. In the chapter relevancy of facts, what it says? Motive, preparation, and previous and subsequent conduct. The heading of this section is motive, preparation, and previous and subsequent conduct. What it says? Any fact is relevant which shows or constitute a motive or preparation for any fact in issue or relevant facts. That means a fact which shows the motive of a person to commit a crime or to preparation of a person to commit a crime or his previous conduct of a party prior to commission of a crime. Even after committing a crime, what is the subsequent conduct? Those are relevant facts and evidence may be given to prove the same. Evidence may be given. These are corroborative evidence. So what is motive? Motive means what? Which moves a person to commit a crime, to commit an incident. But always a crime is committed with a motive. Ultimate intention, ultimate purpose, the purpose for which a crime is committed. Suppose, for an example, there is an oldie man and a elderly oldie man and one servant is working there in his house. Here the motive that he will kill that man, he will get the property. So here intention and motive are two different things. Intention is immediate act which by which a person causes something, that is immediate act, immediate intention. Intention is what is the intention? That is also the mind of a person. That intention can be proved from the act and the manner of in which a particular act is committed. That proves an intention. For an example, if a person stabs on the chest of a person, deceased, so that proves the intention that he had intention to kill him. If a person stabs on the leg of a person, there the intention is not to kill. So intention or motive are two different things. Motive means that means which impels a moving power which impels a person to commit an act. It is the inducement of doing the act. Motive induces a person to do an act. So, therefore, evidence of the existence of motive for the crime charge is admissible. Why? Because evidence of motive is always relevant for to prove for a man to do an act wholly without motive. Evidence of motive helps the court to connect the accused with the crime. If evidence are coming to prove the motive, that is admissible evidence, because thereby it will be easy for the court. It will be easy for the court to connect the accused in committing that crime. So that's why evidence may be given to prove the motive of a person. So in some cases, motive is not true. But if other evidence are there, motive, even if motive is not true, thereby the guilty of the accused cannot be taken, cannot be that speciated. Or for that reason only the accused will not be acquitted. As if for the reason as no motive is proved, for that reason the accused cannot be acquitted if other evidences are there. So here evidence may be given to prove the motive. Motive, in many example you may say, suppose a person, there is a this better relationship of a husband and the wife, and the husband is in love with another woman. His motive is, if you will kill the wife, they will get the chance to marry the another woman for the second time. So that is a motive. So when evidence is tendered to prove the motive, that is admissible as relevant evidence, as per the provision of section 8 of the Indian Evidence Act. Now the second category is the preparation. before committing a crime, always, in most of the cases, there is preparation. The preparation, suppose a person is accused of committing murder. Prior to that, he has purchased a knife. He has purchased a gun. That gun was used in committing the murder. So this preparation, evidence regarding preparation of the accused to commit the crime, that is also relevant. Similarly, suppose a person is accused of committing murder by administering poison, that he has purchased poison, he had purchased poison similar to the poison which was found in the stomach of the dead body. So that will prove the commission of the crime by the accused. So that's why the section 8 provides that preparation, that is also admissible evidence. And conduct. Third category is of conduct. What is conduct? Conduct usually means a behavior of a person, how we behave, previous conduct and also past conduct, the subsequent conduct in committing a crime. After committing a crime, if the accused absconds, that is a subsequent conduct. Evidence is also admissible to prove the conduct of the party, conduct of the accused, because that will be treated as a corroborative evidence with other evidence to prove the guilty of the accused. So that's why section 8, if you go through this section, what it says, there is a list of illustration. Number of illustrations are there in section 8. What any fact is relevant which shows or constitute a motive or preparation for any fact in issue or relevant fact. Either fact in issue or relevant fact. The conduct of any party or of an agent to any party to any suit or proceeding in reference to such suit or proceeding, or in reference to any fact in issue therein or relevant thereto, and conduct of any person and an offense. Both the conduct is relevant both in civil case as well as the criminal case. So conduct of a party with reference to a civil dispute, that is prior conduct, that is the subsequent conduct. Similarly, the conduct of a person accused of an offense whom is the subject of an proceeding is relevant. When, if such conduct influences or is influenced by any fact in issue or relevant fact. If that conduct does not influence the fact in issue or relevant fact, then that is not relevant. Suppose in another transaction was there, for that there was a conduct, that is immaterial. The word explanation, the word conduct in this section does not include statements. Conduct and statement. You should understand what is the conduct and what is the statement. Mere statement is not conduct. There may be a statement coupled with some conduct. Suppose soon after commission of a crime, the victim came and made a complaint. That is also a conduct. But the victim says, someone casually informed somebody about the incident. That is not a conduct. That may be treated as a mere statement. So when there is a complaint along with the statement, that will be admissible in evidence as conduct. But this explanation is not to affect the relevancy of statement or not any other section. So if the statement is given, mere statement is given, there is no complaint. That doesn't mean that statement is not admissible. That statement may be admissible in any other, as per the, if there is any other provision in the Evidence Act to admit the same. So that is admissible. But as per section 8, only the conduct is admissible. What is conduct? Conduct means a behavior of a person. Similarly, explanation 2 says, so when the conduct of any person is relevant, any statement made to him or in his presence and hearing which affects such conduct is relevant. The illustration says, suppose there is a robbery. People are suspecting that he has committed robbery. So one person of the village came and told that police is coming to conduct the inquiry. Thereafter, the person, on hearing that statement, he absconded. So that will be treated as a conduct. That statement influences the conduct of a person. So if you go through the illustration, that will make it clear. My purpose is, it is such a section, various facts are relevant under the as conduct. So you see, A illustration A is tried for the murder of B. What this says? The fact that A murdered C, that B knew that A had murdered C, and that B had tried to extract money from A by threatening to make his knowledge public are relevant. Because this is the motive. A is accused of committing murder of B. The fact that B was aware of the fact that A had previously committed murder of C, and B was threatening to A and extracting money. Here, in the A is charging is facing trial for committing murder of B. The motive is that if B will be killed, then A will be saved from giving money or disclosing or from the previous crime what he had committed by causing murder of C, and that was known to B. So that was the motive. So evidence may be given to prove the motive of a crime. So A sues B upon a bond for the payment of money. B denies the making of the bond. Suppose when there is a suit for realization of money from B, A has filed a suit for realization of money from B, but B denies the borrowing. So the fact that at the time when the bond was alleged to be made, B required money for particular purpose. That is relevant. That is relevant as motive. So A is not only motive is not only admissible in evidence regarding motive is not only admissible in criminal case but also in civil cases. A is tried for the murder of B by poison. That is preparation. Now the third illustration is regarding preparation. The fact that before the death of B, A procured poison similar to that which was administered to B is relevant as a preparation. That is admissible. So now this is motive, preparation, conduct, previous conduct, and also subsequent. Mere statement is not admissible as evidence as under the provisions of section 8 of the Evidence Act. If that statement is coupled with conduct, influences the conduct, or that there is a conduct and statement, then that is admissible in section as per the provisions of section 8 of the Evidence Act. Now, you see, the question is whether A robbed B. The fact that after B was robbed, she said in A's presence, the police are coming to look for the man who robbed B. And that immediately afterwards A ran away. So here the statement influenced the conduct. So that's why the though it is a mere statement, that is admissible in evidence as per section 8 of the Evidence Act. So another illustration, the question is whether A owes B Rs 10,000. The fact that A asked C to lend him money and D said to C in A's presence and hearing, I advise you not to trust A, for he owes B 10,000 rupees. And that A went away without making any answer are relevant facts as conduct. What is this illustration shows? That A previously had borrowed money from B, but he had not repaid that money. Then A approached D for money. At that time, L in presence of A says, don't, presence of A asked D not to give money to A because he had previously borrowed money. And thereby A did not make any complaint and went away. So that shows that evidence is admissible as a conduct. He did not react. The question is who committed a crime. The fact that A absconded after receiving a letter warning him that inquiry was being made for the crime and the contents of the letter are relevant. A is accused of a crime. The fact that after the commission of the alleged crime, he absconded or was in possession of property or proceeds of property acquired by the crime, all are relevant facts as per the provisions of section 8 of the Indian Evidence Act. Now, the second is that now let us come to the provision of section 9 of the Evidence Act. What section 9 says? Facts necessary to explain or introduce relevant facts. Sometimes facts necessary to explain or introduce a fact in issue or relevant fact. What is introduce, necessary, explain? The illustration makes it clear. The question is whether a given document is a will of A. So the evidence may be given to prove the state of A's property and of his family at the date of the alleged will may be relevant as fact necessary to explain or introduce a relevant fact. So fact necessary to explain or introduce a fact in issue or relevant fact, or which support or rebut the inference suggested by fact in issue. Any evidence which suggests the inference drawn by of a fact in issue or rebut the fact in issue or relevant fact, or which establish the identity of anything or person. Any evidence which establishes the identity of a thing or a person, all are relevant, or which show the relation of parties by whom any such fact was transacted are relevant insofar as they are necessary for that purpose. So in this, under this section, 4 types of facts are admissible. What are those facts? Fact necessary to introduce or explain fact in issue or relevant facts. Facts which support or rebut an inference of an fact in issue. Facts which establish the identity of anything or person. Facts which fix time or place. And facts which shows the relation of parties. What do in my introduction of explanatory? Evidence is always offered. Why? Of the facts which are necessary to introduce the main fact or some relevant fact. Always it is necessary. What is that? Why? Because that will make the, it will facilitate the proof of the particular fact in issue. So main fact in issue. For example, where the question is, the illustration says whether a particular will is the will of A or not. So the state of will, a property of will, how much property A had at that time, what was, how many family members were in the family of A, those are relevant as facts necessary to explain. What is explanation? Explaining the state of, the quantity, extent of property of A, extent, that is explaining or introducing the circumstances in which will was executed. All those facts are admissible in evidence. Now, second category of fact is we support or rebut an inference. We support or rebut an inference. Inference means what? A conclusion. Suppose there is evidence which support or rebut. Evidence can be given of facts which support or rebut an inference suggested by a fact in use or relevant facts. For example, a person is accused of a crime. The fact that soon after the commission of the crime, he absconded from his house is relevant. What? To support the inference that he has committed. Similarly, it is also admissible to rebut the inference. For an example, if that person gives explanation, shows some cause for his absconding, that will rebut the inference that he is not guilty. So here, house is relevant, that is, conduct affected by such a conduct is relevant because it suggests the inference that he is guilty. When a person, soon after committing crime, absconds, that is a fact to suggest the inference that he is guilty. Similarly, report the inference that he is guilty. That means suppose that person adduces evidence to show that he had not absconded. He had some urgent work or in a particular town, and for that reason he had gone there. So that will also rebut the inference that he is not guilty. That fact is admissible in evidence. Then the third category is of fact, facts which establish the identity of anything or person. When some crimes are committed, the witnesses had no prior acquaintance with the accused persons. There may be a robbery, the robbers were not known to the victim or the members of the family of the house where the robbery took place, but they had this chance to see the face of those accused persons for certain time so that they can identify. So this test identification this is done. Test identification TI period is done as per the provision of section 9 of the Evidence Act. What is it? Facts which establish the identity of a person or a thing. Not only of the person but a thing also. Suppose a particular article is stolen. That article is identified in test identification period. That evidence is admissible as per the provision of section 9. So what is test identification period? When it is necessary. If the accused persons were previously known to the complainant or the witnesses, then test identification period is not required. Test identification period or identification of the accused is not required. But if the accused persons were not known to the witnesses or the complainant, then in such case, the test identification is very, very important. In the how test identification period is conducted, the suspects are asked to stand in a line with other similar persons or persons of similar physique, similar stature, and the witness is asked to identify the culprit. If he identifies the culprit, then that is admissible. That identification evidence is given to prove the identification. That is admissible as per the provisions of section 9 of the Evidence Act. Similar things are also identified. Suppose from a particular house, some things were stolen. Then police recovered those things, seized those things, and a test identification period was done for identification of things. A particular jewelry, particular this article that is put with other article of similar nature, and the witness is asked to identify. If he identifies that thing, that is admissible in evidence. So, regarding test identification period, whatever identification is done, there are various case laws. If for the first time, if the accused persons were not known to the witness previously, the identification of the accused persons for the first time in court, that witness, that evidence is valueless. Usually, when test identification period is done, test identification period is done when the accused persons were known to the witnesses previously, but the witnesses had the chance to see them and they remember the physique or the face, or they can identify, they are able to identify them if for the second time those persons are put in identification period. So here the test identification period is admissible. TI period admissible report. So how TI period is the identification is proved? The identification is proved by the witness actually who was identified. The officer, that identification cannot be proved by merely examining the officer who has conducted the TI period. Because the person who has identified the accused, he must face the cross-examination. From his cross-examination, the accused, it will be known to the court whether there was proper identification of the accused or not. The facts which fix time or place, any facts which fixes the time at when a particular incident occurs, or a place where a particular incident occurred, that is also admissible in evidence. Time that is expert opinion is taken for fixing the time when it occurred. Similarly, forensic evidence is taken to prove the place where that a particular incident occurred. Suppose there is a murder. If blood stains were collected from that place, any footmarks, that is forensic examination, scientific examination was done, evidence may be given to prove what is that, to fix the time and place where the incident occurred. Similarly, facts which show the relation of the parties, that is also admissible in evidence. What is relation of parties? Suppose in which type of cases the relation of the parties, how the accused are related, how the accused are related to the complainant or the witnesses, those evidence may be given. So that is relation of the parties is required. In suppose in the case of libel or this, that is required. So in this case, regarding this identification of the accused by the witnesses for the first time in the court without being tested by a prior test identification period was valueless. That is that this law has been settled by the Honorable Supreme Court in Delhi Administration versus B.C. Shukla. What? That means identification of the accused for the first time in court without test identification is of no use. The Supreme Court has also held that where one of the witnesses failed to identify the accused at the identification period, identification by him of the accused in court was also useless. So there are various case laws regarding identification period. Even where the accused demands, suppose the accused demands a test identification period, but the investigation officer doesn't do the identification period. So that will not affect the prosecution case if other evidence are available. So here, even where the accused demands TI period, the prosecution is not bound to do so, and its case will not be weakened by the mere absence of the period. It was held in the circumstantial case that the failure of to hold the TI period, even when ordered by the Sessions Court, was not fatal to the prosecution case when there are other evidence to prove the guilt of the accused. There may be delay in holding TI period. When even there is delay in holding a TI period, that will not be a ground to disbelieve the identification report or the evidence of the witness who has identified the accused, if the delay is properly explained. So TI period in various, so identification period when necessary, that has been the law has been settled in the by the Honorable Supreme Court in the decision reported in Jadunath Singh versus State of AP. It seems it has been clearly laid down by this court that the absence of test identifier in all cases is not fatal, and if the accused person is well known by sight, it would be waste of time to put him for the identification. If the accused persons were previously known to the complainant or other witnesses, then the identification period is not necessary. If the prosecution fails to hold an identifier on the plea that the witness already knew the accused well, and it transfers in the course of the trial that the witness did not know the accused previously, the prosecution would run the risk of losing its case. There are various cases regarding this test identification period. Now we are clear regarding section 9 and of the Evidence Act. The other, so far as the section 10 now, things said or done by conspirator in reference to common design. Section 10 says, where there is a reasonable ground to believe that two or more persons have conspired to commit an offense. Conspiracy means what? Agreement. Two or more persons, there is an agreement or they have conspired, agreed to do a crime, that is conspiracy. Have conspired together to commit an offense or an action. Two or more persons, there is reasonable ground to believe that two or more persons have conspired to commit an offense or commit a actionable wrong. Anything said or done written by one of such person in reference to their common intention of committing the conspiracy, in reference, not any other matter, in reference to that common intention, from which after the time when such intention was first entrusted by any one of them, after the time when they passed for the first time that intention was first entrusted by any one of them, is a relevant fact as against each of the persons believed to be so conspiring. So this section said, first, what are the requirements of this section? There must be a reasonable ground to believe that two or more persons have entered into a conspiracy. If there is no reasonable ground to believe that two or more persons have entered a conspiracy, then this section is not applicable. First, this is first requirement. Some materials are there. Two or more persons have conspired to commit a crime or to do an actionable wrong. Second, the act on question must have been done after the time when the intention to conspire was first entertained by one of them. What? That the act in question, the act or regarding that conspiracy must have been done after the time when the intention to conspire was first entertained by one of them. Then the act must have been done in reference to their common intention. If that act is with reference to their common intention, that is not admissible in evidence. So there is reasonable ground to believe there is a conspiracy, and that act is done after the time when there was a first intention for committing such conspiracy, and the act must have been done to prove the existence of the conspiracy. So the act must have been done in reference to their common intention. So in such case, the evidence of such an act can be given for the following two purposes. Evidence may be given to prove the following two purposes. What are those? To prove the existence of the conspiracy, or to show that a particular person was a party to the conspiracy. There is a conspiracy, and to prove the fact is admissible to show that a particular person was a party to the conspiracy. So now the section 10, if the illustration is that means reasonable ground to exist for being that A has joined in conspiracy to wage war against the government of India. That is reasonable ground to believe that A has joined in a conspiracy to wage war against the government of India. The fact that B procured arms in Europe for the purpose of the conspiracy, C collected money in Calcutta for a like object, D persuaded persons to join the conspiracy in Bombay, E published writing advocating the object in view at Agra, and A transmitted from Delhi to G at Kabul the money which C had collected in Calcutta, and the contents of letter written by H giving an account of the conspiracy are each relevant. What purpose? To prove the conspiracy, that a particular person is a party to that conspiracy. Both to prove the existence of the conspiracy and to prove his complicity in it, although he may have been ignored of all of them, and although the persons by whom they were done were stranger to him, and although they may have taken place before he joined the conspiracy or after he left it. So this section is very important. There is reasonable ground to believe that there is a conspiracy to commit an offense or to do an actionable wrong. So anything said, done, or written, three requirements: either said, anything said, or anything done, or anything written by whom? By any one of such conspirators. By any one of such conspirators, any person, what? In reference to common intention. In reference to common intention of committing of that conspiracy, not prior to the entertainment of intention, but after the time when such intention was first entertained. After the time the first intention was first entertained by any one of them, is a relevant fact. Is a relevant fact. To prove what? To prove the relevant fact as against each of the person. That is a relevant fact as against each of the conspirator. For the purpose of proving the existence of the conspiracy and for the purpose of showing that any such person was a party to it. If we go through the section 10 by word, it will make it clear. It will be clear how the section has made it clear that how far the evidence is admissible against a conspiracy to prove the criminal conspiracy and that he is a party to the conspiracy. This is not said in section 10 of the Evidence Act. Let us If anybody has any doubt, he may ask a question.